All right, so this is going to be a video explaining kind of how to use Simulation Craft to figure out a few things about your character. Most of the information that I've gathered on this and that I'm going to be sharing with you has come from various sources around the net, including a guide that was on Reddit, as well as some information from alteredtime.com, which is a website for mages, specifically for World of Warcraft. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to download the nightly build. And I've put a link to this on the Malice Afterthought webpage and in our forums. So I'm going to click on that link and it's going to take me to the download directory. The one that we want is the SimC setup for Win64 if you're running Win64. If you're on a Windows 32-bit machine, you'll use Win32. If you're not sure how to find that, now I'm on Windows 10, so it's going to be a little bit different for everybody, but you can go into your start menu, and I may not even be able to find it on mine. Uh, just because it's so different here. In settings, your system, and about. And you will see under system type, 64-bit operating system. If you're on something prior to Windows 10 or Windows 8, you'll want to find the My Computer icon, right click on it, select properties. It'll come up, it'll be right there on the first part of the screen. And it'll tell you what version you're using. If you don't have 7-zip or something along those lines, the .exe file here is an installer that's made specifically to run on Windows. You download it, it only takes a couple minutes. It's not really large in size. It's about a 44 meg download, 45 meg download. And once it's done, you'll go ahead and click on this button and let it install. I'm going to run this actually off of an older version. Just so that we can get this going, unless this finishes while I'm talking. When you install it, it's going to prompt you to overwrite the older version, yada, yada, yada. You can just tell it yes. For right now, because I don't feel like going through the install process, we'll just open up my old copy of Simulation Craft. I tend to keep a icon for it on my desktop. There's not always a new one there, but every now and then there is. So the first page that you're going to come to is just kind of an introduction page. There's some hints and tips and tricks, and there's a lot of reading that you could do here if you'd like. It's certainly good information, but it's not necessary if you watch this video through to see what's going on. So we have a number of tabs up at the top, and they're all very helpful, but we're going to focus on a couple of them right now. We're going to focus on the Import tab to show us how to bring in our characters and see what's going on with them. I'd like to also point out the SimC add-on tab. There's an add-on that is downloadable from Curse Games. It's called Simulation Craft. I have it installed actually because it's very useful when you don't want to wait for your character to update on the Armory, especially since the Armory has been slow lately. It used to be if you signed off, you'd update immediately. That doesn't happen anymore. So we're going to do the regular import from the Armory since I haven't been on since last night when my legs started killing me. We're going to go down and select our realm, and we make sure our region is set to US. Type in our character name here and hit import. Only takes a couple of seconds. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. You actually can change any of this that you want to. It's kind of a much more advanced solution. But one of the things that's really kind of nice is if you take the time to read through this, it gives you the rotation that it's using when it's doing the simulation tests. This isn't necessarily the absolutely optimal rotation, but it's usually a pretty good one. And it's very good for the simulations to kind of get an idea of what's going to give you more damage, what works better. You can change this around to see, in fact, if putting a spell in a different order will add or decrease damage. This works for any class, by the way. And you can do it. You can change your talents out, which are all listed in here. You can see right here which talents I'm currently using. Flame on, Blast Wave, Meteor, blah, 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 blah. It tells you when to use them, what's going on with it. The other thing to note is it does save previous imports. I'm going to go ahead and close a couple of these out right now. But one of the nice things is that you'll be able to see what the SimC add-on import looks like. It's a lot more pared down. And this one I actually did a test to see if I could find out what a different pair of feet look like. So the SimC add-on will just paste in everything that you've got without the names and without the fun stuff to let you know what's going on here. So one of the things it does is it posts in your artifact with all the powers that you've taken and all of the relics that you've got in and everything like that. So you don't have to worry about that. That's in here. One of the things, once we've got this all done, we're going to skip off of this tab for right now, and we're just going to go run a basic simulation. I'm going to set a couple of options so that we understand how those work. And the only point of the simulation I'm about to run is show you what SimC says your DPS should be at under certain conditions. And I'm going to do two different ones just to give us an idea. So we're going to go to the Options tab. And before we get into too much, one of the things I want to do is point out the Buffs and Debuffs tab. For general simulations, we want to make sure that both of these, or all of these are checked. I don't do the toggle all buffs or toggle the debuffs. It's just easier to leave it at the defaults. We'll go into the globals. You want to make sure that all of this is set. It should be from your import, so there's no reason to worry about it. If you want to try a different spec, you can switch this to one of your inactive specs. I usually set fight length to 450 because it's about 7.5 minutes, and it's about right for most of the fights that we run. And I set the fight style to Helter Skelter because there's very few fights in raids where we get to just stand still the entire time. There's always a bit of running around, and Helter Skelter also kind of does a an averaging of your DPS and including movement and things like that. I leave player skill at elite, not because I actually think I am, but because it gives me the best understanding of what the class and the spec can do and shows me what I should be shooting for. If you leave default roll to auto, it will pick whatever your roll was on the armory. So if you need to test one of the other ones, you can obviously switch it here for those of you that play classes that can handle all three. I've never actually used the GUI localization because it does it based off of your armory, so I've never had to set that. You can, for DPS, you can set the number of enemies that you're facing. So if you know that you're going up against a boss that is 4 bosses at once, as opposed to a single boss, and you need to do damage on all 4 of them, you can change this to 4, and it will give you your multi-target stats. I generally leave it at 1, and I set the target level to raid boss. Target race humanoid, you can switch this to demon for Legion. It'll give you a better idea of how you're going to do it against demons, since we do have some trinkets that are specifically for that. I'm not really going to get into using this for simming tanking today because there's a lot more to that. Tanks have to worry about all sorts of stuff. TMI, threat generation, damage, survivability, things that DPS doesn't need to worry about. I'm also not going to get into healing because, quite frankly, I don't know jack about healing. The last piece is over here in the advanced options, and this is setting up how your computer is going to handle this, how much processor power you're going to give to it. I'm giving it 4 threads. I'm setting it at a low priority, leaving world lag at about 100 milliseconds. And I apologize, by the way, if I'm sniffling or if I end up coughing at all. I am dealing with a little bit of a cold, so my apologies for that. I don't do deterministic random number generator because the regular one is more random as opposed to using the same seed for everything. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to run a simulation on this and let it output it. It's doing 10,000 iterations, so it's going to be fairly quick. This is mostly so I can just go over and show you what the simulation looks like. There's a number of things in here to keep an eye on and take a look at. Now notice we didn't scale anything, we didn't put any plot factors in or anything like that. You can look at what it's predicting your average DPS is going to be based on your gear and your talent specification. It shows you here which talents it used, which is what I signed off with last night. And you can see what spells did the most damage per execute time. So longer cast spells doing a lot of damage is a good thing. But you'll see that that doesn't generally happen. Dragon's Breath is an instant cast for me. Pyroblast is generally an instant cast for me. Phoenix Flames is an instant cast. Fireball and Scorch, however, have casting times. So you can get an idea of what your heaviest hitters are by looking at this. The biggest thing to look at, really, is DPS distribution. So this is the way that the DPS fell over the course of all 10,000 iterations. And what that means is that while it says 277,598 here, you're not always going to hit that. Sometimes you'll be higher, sometimes you'll be lower. You'll notice that the max that the sim could pull was 324 and the minimum was 236. So generally speaking, my DPS should be somewhere in that range. Obviously, it all depends on how much movement's involved and various other things, but this is a marker that you can give yourself to kind of look at it. The damage per second is over time, So you can see that fire is particularly spiky. Each one of these spikes is a combustion burn phase for me. Each class will look a little bit different. You'll be able to see things like that out of there. You can see which abilities did how much DPS, which buffs were happening when, or how this thing played them up, and how often it got things like enhanced pyrotechnics, how often I got heating up according to this, hot streaks, etc. A lot of good information in here, but this really doesn't help us pick out our gear. It doesn't help us know what we should be looking at. So we're going to close this results off. Before we do, notice that there's a save button here. You can save this to go back and look at it later. So what we're going to do is we're going to click back to the options. And this time I'm going to turn on scaling. And I'm going to tell it that I want to scale. I want to center the scale delta over DPS. What that means is that I want it to scale these abilities based off of the DPS that they're going to generate. You don't have to do this. You can set it to no and let it just auto scale, and it usually works out just fine. I found that while I'm trying to find exact stat weights to like punch into AMR because I'm being lazy or something, this works a lot better. So you turn on the abilities that you want to scale for. I'm a mage, so obviously intellect, spell power, crit rating, haste rating, mastery, and versatility. Honestly, I don't really care about spell power anymore because it doesn't show up on gear. So we're going to go ahead and run a simulation here. This one's going to take a little bit longer. It's going to go through the simulating part, and then you're going to watch it scale. It'll scale each and every one of the abilities, and I'm going to mute my mic while it does that real quick. At least I hope I am. And then we'll come back. So it's going to take it a couple minutes to scale each of the abilities, and then we'll get another results screen like we did before. This is strictly for generating stat weights. When we're trying to compare gear, we don't want to do the scaling just because of how long it takes. What we're interested in at that point is just the differences in the various pieces of gear. And I'll get to how to do that here in just a minute. We're going to use Ask Mr. Robot to get our IDs for all of our gear, which I'm sure you saw in the simulate screen before, where it shows all these IDs and bonus IDs, and what the hell do they all mean? Well, I can't tell you what they all mean because the bonus IDs seem to get a little bit complicated and they don't seem to have a rhyme or reason that I've found yet. Obviously, like something being Warforged has one bonus ID, being Titanforged has another, but there have been different pieces of gear that are both Warforged that seem to have different bonus IDs. So Warforged isn't apparently one ID unless it's one ID for that slot. I'm not sure. But I will show you how to find those as opposed to trying to tell you what they're for. We are on versatility, so we should be done here in just a minute. And there we go. So we're going to see one difference in this, and that difference is going to be the scale factors. So right here we can see the scale factors for my damage per second. And what this means is that it's showing me which abilities will get me how much DPS by increasing them. And right now, crit gets me another 8.47 DPS, whereas int is 7.61. Versatility gives me 646, haste 641, and mastery 508. What this translates to is what you normally see on Icy Veins, is that little line down there. The normalized piece tells you that what the ability is worth in regards to int. It always normalizes on your primary stat. The scale deltas is its position for error. Normally this is like 569, so it's 0.569. Actually, no, that's not what the scale deltas are. Ignore that piece. I'm going nuts. The error percentage is how much it expects the error to be by. So 0.29% of error up or down, and that's your kind of your variance. And again, we have our scales over time, etc., etc. So that is how we generate stat weights. One thing I will tell you, your stat weights will change for every piece of gear that you change on your character. So you add a piece of gear, in my case, let's say I add a piece of gear that adds crit, adds verse, but it drops some of my haste. Well, I'm sitting right around a haste breakpoint right now. So when I do that and I rerun the simulation, it's going to come up and it's going to weight haste a lot heavier than it did before. because it wants to get me back to that haste breakpoint, that place where I've got enough haste to get another pyroblast inside of a combustion cooldown, things like that. So watch for that. Um, we're going to go ahead and close out these results, and I'm going to bring this down into a smaller screen so that you all can see what I'm doing. And now I'm going to pull up Ask Mr. Robot. And even if it's not the most reliable for simming and gearing and everything else, it does work. One of the nice little functions about Ask Mr. Robot is if you hover over an ability or an item, you'll see down at the very bottom, and I can't move my mouse to show you, but if you look at the very bottom of this pop-up, it has a number of IDs and then bonus IDs. So these are the things that we need to know in order to adjust for different gear on our character. And you may be thinking, well, that's great, but I don't want to sign into my character, switch gear, sign out to get those bonus IDs. Well, the wonderful thing is you don't have to. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to give ourselves a few extra lines in between our gear list and all of that wonderful commented out documentation stuff down at the bottom. So let's say I just got a new ring, and I want to equip said ring, but I don't know anything about it. Well, I can click on Ask Mr. Robot's little ring there, and it'll come up and show me all the upgrades and give you a basic idea. But I want to sim it out to be sure. So I'm going to say, okay, I got the Dragon Birthstone ring, but I got it with a socket and with leech, just so we can get some different things in here. And I'm going to go with an 895 Titan Forge. Let's just make this the best freaking ring I could have possibly gotten on this drop. And now, down at the bottom, I've got a bunch of IDs. I'm going to click over here so that my simulation craft window is up. And the nice thing is you'll notice that my browser does not have to have focus in order to do this. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to type copy, and it has to be in all lowercase. I found this out the hard way, equals a quote, and we're just going to name this Razel Demonic Ring. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do finger 1 equals demonic underscore birthstone ring, and we'll do comma ID equals 141486 bonus underscore ID equals 41 slash, notice it's a slash, not a comma, 1507 slash 1808 slash 3337. Now, I did put a socket in this, so I'm going to also put a comma and put gems equals 150 crit. And then since I'm an enchanter, I'm going to put enchant equals 200 crit, because those are the enchants that I can use. Now, one of the things about this is you can do multiple copies. But if you do, you need to remember that your second copy keeps the gear from the first copy. So at this point, I want to do a copy, and I want to put the ring on the other finger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my finger 1 old one back in, and then I'm going to copy this to right below it and change that to finger 2. And I want to run these both together because I want to see which finger it's going to be better on. I'm going to turn off scaling because otherwise this takes too long. And I'm going to go ahead and turn, just for the sake of speed, I'm going to drop the number of iterations here down to 1,000. Go back and check my simulate again. It's all set, and punch the button. It's going to go through. It's actually going to be pretty quick because I dropped it down to 1,000 iterations. We're not going to get anything very accurate, but we are going to get it. Now what you'll see is that this is my base DPS right here. This is what it happens if I put it on finger 1, and what happens if I replace the ring on finger 2. So it looks like replacing finger 2 is better. But I warn you to hover over, because if you get over the error area, it will tell you the difference in the maximum, the upper quartile, the medium, lower quartile, and the minimum. These can help you make a choice when the DPS is really close. This one's about 1100, so I'd probably just go ahead and put it on finger 2 based on this anyway. But if you come down here, you can see that actually the maximum for replacing it on finger 1 is a little bit higher. Probably not enough to make me make the choice or make the jump, but it is there. And then, of course, our regular DPS down at the bottom, which actually says that the maximum without that ring and with our current rings was 2k higher. We only did 1,000 iterations, though, so there's a large amount of error potential here. So either way, that's how you do separate pieces of gear. I highly recommend doing more iterations than 1,000. In fact, I recommend not doing it by iterations at all. I recommend doing it by target error. Set it to 0.05%, tell it to simulate. It's going to take longer. You can continue to do this with as many pieces of gear as you want. You can do it with an entire set. You don't have to change things back if you want to see what they are additive. Say you got 4 new pieces of gear and you want to see what each one of them adds to your DPS because you're pretty confident they're upgrades anyway. The most important things to remember about simming out gear this way is that you need to put in the comma the ID of the item, any bonus IDs applied to the item based on how it dropped. If it's a ring or it has a socket or anything like that, you'll want to put your gems and your enchants. You can see up here that the enchant for Mark of the Hidden Satyr is exactly what you'd expect. Mark underscore of underscore the. There are no spaces allowed in gear setups. If you need to sim relics for your artifact, it gets a little trickier, mostly because it's harder to find the relic IDs. And there's colons and all sorts of other fun stuff in there. But you can still do it. You can come in here, hover over one, you'll see the relic with its bonus IDs, and you can punch that in, and it will work. You just want to remember that you're separating the relic ID out so that this is one relic ID, this is one relic ID. I'm not entirely sure actually how this works. One relic ID plus bonus ID, next relic ID plus bonus IDs, and last relic ID plus bonus IDs, I'm guessing. Anyway, I'd have to play with that for a while because I haven't actually done any simming with relics. But that is a pretty good set of how you can look at this and how you can look at gear. Remember, copy has to be lowercase. All of your gear information has to be lowercase as well. If you put an uppercase, you're going to get an error. I'll show you what that looks like real quick. Should error out on me automatically. And there we go. It encountered an error because it has no idea what a finger with a capital F is. It's just the way that it works. It'll throw you to the log, fun stuff. You can come back in and change it back to a lowercase f and it'll all work again. This works for any slot at all. And again, like I said, if you want to switch a piece of gear back from the previous one, you can. If I had not included this line, then finger 1 and 2 would have both been the demonic birthstone ring. And would have been a really interesting thing, but not what we wanted to look at. I hope this helps. If it does, let me know. If there's more questions you guys have about SimCraft, let me know. There are a couple of classes that have some really great resources in this area online that I would encourage people to go look at. For example, with mages, I highly recommend that anybody that is serious about playing a mage joins up with alter-time.com and says hi to those guys there, just in case you want to see the actual page or have the URL on your screen. There it is. There's forums for each and a bunch of general discussion and add-ons forums. These guys are great. We have some of the best mages that I've ever talked to or seen on the server doing theory crafting for us here, and it just works out really, really well. So that all said, thank you everybody for your time. I hope this helped. If it was confusing, please let me know in the forums. If there's things you'd like me to clarify, please let me know in the forums, and any way that I can help, I will be happy to.